So how's your connection?
Happy day. It just drops in and out. So I think maybe the way we should do this is I'll ask you a question and then you answer it, and then I'll just trust that you've said it right. So let's do these Facebook changes then.
Yeah.
So this has been something that's been a lot of stuff about in the news. People will have seen that, and the people may have even noticed the changes on their Facebook feed. And for anybody that's got a small business or just promote something like a podcast, the impact could be quite scary.
Yeah, so I mean, everyone is scared. That's the big thing. So many people are scared by these Facebook changes. They come about that Mark Zuckerberg wrote a letter, as he does when he wants to make announcements. And the letter, in short, basically said that they are not going to split the feeds into business and personal, but they are going to heavily promote personal engagement, personal posts, and we're going to see a big decline in things that are business promotion or anything like that. So Ant's being interrupted on the train. Bring the guy in.
I just having my check. Yeah, this is just to prove it's a real train or an expensive actor.
Hello.
So I'm so millennial. I've got my ticket on my other phone.
There we go. So these changes could be quite big for businesses and pages. That's the thing that everyone's worried about. All the small businesses, marketers, that sort of thing. From I just have Facebook and I don't really care about promoting things point of view, it's actually pretty good. So you'll see a lot more from your friends. It will be in a better order of what you actually care about, and it will be promoting conversations and engagements. The official words go like this. So recently we've gotten feedback from our community that public content, posts from businesses, brands and media is crowding out the personal moments that led us to connect more with each other. Mark Zuckerberg then goes on to say the first changes you'll see will be in news feeds, where you can expect to see more from your friends, family and groups you participate in. As we roll this out, you'll see less public content like posts from businesses, brands and media. And the public content you will see will be held to the same standard. It should encourage meaningful interactions between people. So the big thing here is that business pages are going to struggle. Pages will be difficult. Now, we've written a blog on this, and it's probably the blog that took me the longest to ever write, because that's all we know, what Mark Zuckerberg said in the letter. So it's a bit like, oh, what will it mean? However, what we do know is that natural organic reach of posts on Facebook pages has dropped since 2014 massively. We're looking at less than a quarter, less than a fifth really of the engagement we used to get organically simply by posting something on a page. And so if you have a podcast page and all you're doing as part of your social media strategy is to just drop a link or an embeddable player on there, then that's going to reach even less people after these changes, and you won't have seen a huge amount of success from that anyway. What the good thing is, and the good thing is for anyone that uses Facebook and for anyone that's doing it already, is that you will get promoted to the top if you're getting interaction. So if you create posts that genuinely are good content and they get a conversation going, that's not going to be a problem for you. It's not going to cause any problems at all. And that's a brilliant thing, because it gets that conversation flowing, it gets people talking. And that's what Facebook should have been about. It's just been sort of filled with people just pushing their blog, people pushing their business. And so if you're creating great content, you have nothing to worry about, really. So as podcasters, how should we feel? Well, don't worry too much. You might have to just do a little bit of extra work to push your podcast out there. Like I say, if you're just posting a link and that's pretty much it, then you're going to get no engagement and you're not going to get much back from it. However, if you are creating conversations, you're creating meaningful content, you're adding to groups and communities that are having conversations about what your podcast is about, you've got nothing to worry about. The other thing to note is that, as I said, this could be just a letter and you won't see that many changes at all, and people creating media might not see many changes at all. So maybe you don't need to worry at all. Maybe we can just ignore all this and carry on with our lives. But it's worth noticing, and it's worth just creating meaningful content and conversations. The biggest podcasts still have loads of people having conversations about them on Facebook. So if you go and do that, you've got nothing to worry about with this.
So is it still worth having a podcast page on Facebook?
That's a good question. I think that it depends what your podcast is. So we've had a couple of comments saying, oh, but I don't want to connect with people with my personal account. Personal accounts are going to get promoted easier. They're going to get more engagement. They're going to get more conversations under them, and they're going to launch to the top. So if your podcast has self-branding or you're pushing yourself out there as the host, then using your personal profile is going to work so much better than a page. Having a page isn't going to be detrimental. It just means if you rely on that solely or on its own, you're not going to get the organic reach from it. Facebook have done this partly because they want to improve Facebook, and partly, and most people think more so than the other point, is that they want you to spend money on advertising. That is their number one moneymaker with Facebook, so they want to improve that and get more people to spend money. So, I mean, if you want to boost posts via your Facebook page, then absolutely great. That's what they want you to do. If you want to get organic reach, then you need to move away from pages, really.
Is that cost effective? Because if people are still going to get...
I've lost him now. And whilst Stan's connection is on and off, I'll get him to restart that question. But if you are watching, just say hello, drop us a comment. We will shout you out. We're gonna have to get you to start that question again. I was just saying, if you are watching, do say hello in the comments. We'll shout you out. And if you've got any questions as we go along, please do just pop them in there. Hello to Jim, who's watching. And Tyler, and are you still there? Can you ask that question again? Potentially not. Hi Tyler, thanks for watching. Hi Maria, Kevin, Maxine, Ian Young, hi there. If you just drop a hello into the messages, we'd love to see who is watching and who's there. Ant is losing connection. He is on a train, as we've said a couple of times. And we were just talking about the Facebook pages changes, or the Facebook changes for podcast listeners. I will, in the interest of time, move on to the next point because Ant's not there to ask the question. But this week we actually launched something quite cool, but this isn't about us. We launched a new product on Amazon Alexa. And it's important. Like, the way that voice activation is moving forward is really, really important. Just bringing Ant back into the chat. So Amazon Alexa is getting huge. I think just before Christmas, 1% of listening or share of ear was on Amazon Alexas. We're thinking it's tracking up to 10% already this year, and that's just in the space of less than a month. And that's because the amount of people that got them for Christmas, the advertising campaigns were massive, and the little Echo Dots actually really reduced in price hugely down to about 30 quid. So it's a huge one, and we're really looking forward to being able to get our podcast on there. So how do you get your podcast on there? That's the big question. That's what everyone's asking. I know that if you have a podcast, this is what you guys want to know. Getting a podcast on there is pretty easy because the inbuilt podcast app, or the way that Amazon Alexa devices listen to podcasts, is with TuneIn Radio. Old app, mainly built for TuneIn. Mainly built for radio, but then they sort of pivoted onto podcasts, and that's how shows and radio shows and podcasts are found by Amazon Alexa. So all you really need to do to get your podcast onto Amazon Alexa and make sure it's there for people to easily get just by asking for it is to make sure that your podcast is on TuneIn. Now, there's a little bit of a sort of backwards way to get onto TuneIn, and that's that you have to sort of fill in a form via their website and that sort of thing. So if you're not on there, go and do it now, because it does take a couple of days. Another thing worth noting as well is that if your podcast isn't normal words, and so, for example, this video comes from the PODTIPS group, and we have the PODTIPS podcast, PODTIPS isn't a word, it's not a normal word, so actually Alexa struggles to find our PODTIPS podcast. However, if you have normal words in your podcast, say it's, hi Tony, thanks for joining us, say it's the football show, then it's going to find it really easily. The only other thing as well is that if your podcast is named very similar to a music track, there's a good chance, or a radio station, there's a good chance it's going to pick up on that as well. So it's just about the names. It is going to learn, but being there is going to be so important. So go over and make sure your show is on TuneIn, and you'll be over on Alexa, which is fantastic. And I think a lot of the ones there, so Siri, Google Home, even the Sonos ones do pick up from TuneIn for podcasts. I think it's just the way that they're structured. That might change, but to be on there now, you want to be on TuneIn. Now, we spoke last week in our Facebook Live video about the fact that Spotify was coming for podcasters. Podcasters are easily getting on Spotify. If you're with some of the hosts that are approved, like Libsyn, Podbean, Blueberry podcast websites, they can all get you onto Spotify very, very easily. If you are on Spotify, that does link to Alexa as well. Now, it's quite important to be on there because Spotify is huge. For Alexa, tuning's a little bit more important because it's kind of the default. The only way that people would get their podcast on Spotify through an Amazon Alexa is if, sorry, my dog's just getting in the way, is if they had set it up in their settings that when someone asks for something, it always goes to Spotify. Or you go, Alexa, can I have the PodTips podcast on Spotify? And then it looks there. But tune in number one, Spotify will be where it goes after that. It doesn't currently connect to any sort of podcatchers or directly to RSS feeds or anything like that. So you may have to just go get it on TuneIn, get it on Spotify. And if, like I say, if it's difficult words, if it's words that aren't in the English language, then it might struggle with it to start off with, but it will learn and it will get there. And everything that we talk to our speech devices like Amazon Alexa, they're learning and they're sort of understanding what you want from them. So that's where to go. We actually launched something slightly different, so we'll talk about it, not to promote it. I mean, if you want it, you can get it. We launched a podcasting tip daily on Alexa skills. So if you have an Amazon Alexa, drop us a message in the thing. We'd love to know how many people do have them. But if you do have an Amazon Alexa, you'll know that there's something called a flash briefing. So you can set it up that in the mornings it'll read out your news or your whatever you've set it up to. So you can say, right, I want in my flash briefing, I want the weather, I want Sky Sports News, I want this, this, and this, and that will then, when you're in the morning, you go, Alexa, what's in the news or what's on my flash briefing, and it will play those things to you. Now, a flash briefing skill is something that you can build or create to go in there. So we created Podcasting Tip Daily, which is a daily tip for podcasters that plays out in that flash briefing. So you add that in, and then every morning it will go, today's podcasting tip is this, and then there's sort of 30 seconds to a minute tip that you can add into your flash briefing, which is really fantastic. We love that. But maybe there's something you can do to add that in for your podcast. Maybe your podcast is about a business, or it helps people with things, or anything. Or it could be a comedy podcast and you have a joke every day. The thing is, it doesn't have to be daily either. It can be monthly. Tony's just said, I think about 20% of households have Alexa. I'm pretty sure that's true for America. I think it's 10% in the UK, 11%, which is insane because share of it, as I said before, was only 1% just before Christmas. So it's improved. It's hugely expanding. It's rising at a rate that we can't keep up with. So being on there is quite important. And I spoke, I think Jim was watching, he runs Hive, that creates skills for podcasting and for radio shows, or they create skills for Alexa. And he asked why I think that those devices would be so important for podcasts. And I think it comes from the fact that the biggest problem in podcasting has been discoverability. Ant says he thinks he's back, so I'm going to just try and add him in now. I've said I've sent him, but he's not coming up. Hi, Raz. Nice to see you. Yeah, the biggest problem for podcasting has been discoverability. That's been a massive problem. It's because not everyone knows how to grab a podcast really easily, and it's not just the flick of a switch. So it's not like you just switch on your car radio. It's a little bit more difficult. You have to have the right app. You have to search for it, subscribe. People still think subscribe means money. So discoverability has been one of the biggest problems. That will change. I always say that the podcast will do to radio what Netflix has done to television, and we've changed the way that we do look at that. Now, discoverability being the issue, with Alexa devices and voice technology coming into cars, mobile phones, in our homes, hey, Ant's back. With those problems, the discoverability goes away because you can essentially, your trainer's loud. You can essentially just ask for the podcast. Your train is like super loud to the point where I can't hear anything else. You might have to muffle your mic, or he's gone anyway. So yeah, discoverability has been the problem, and the I'm going to kick them off there. Sorry, Anne. Yeah, they will get rid of that discoverability problem, because you'll just be able to ask your phone, your car, whatever it is, just go, can you play the Pod Tips podcast? And they'll just play it. And so that discoverability won't be as much of a problem. So that's why Alexa is quite important. The next bit I wanted to talk about with Ant, he's really struggling on a train. Connection on trains is just not where it needs to be at the moment. But our next topic was to talk about podcast websites. So we started a podcast for this PodTips group. It was the PodTips podcast, cleverly named, right? This isn't to push that, but in this week's episode, we talked about podcast websites. We have a great question from Natalie Haley, who said she's set up with Libsyn. It wasn't specific to Libsyn, but she's set up with that. She's also got a WordPress website. How does she get the podcast onto the website? And we sort of talked about that and the easiest way to use embeddable players, that sort of thing. But then we went into, well, do you need a website? What's the benefit? What isn't? And Ant spoke a lot about the fact that actually when you start a podcast, it's this thing where everyone goes, oh yeah, everyone can podcast, we can do it, it's easy to do. And then all of a sudden you think, oh, hang on, I need to get this equipment, I need to get the hosting set up, I need to get the show descriptions done, oh, do I need transcriptions of those? Oh, and I need a website as well to put it all on. It can really grow, the to-do list grows, and that's what frustrates a lot of people. It gets people put off starting one up, when really what we want, especially as creatives, is just create it and it goes somewhere. So Ant's point was that, and then do we need a podcast website? Does it need to be on that list? The answer was no, you don't need a podcast website. However, we then called on Mark Asquith, who runs podcast websites with the Entrepreneurs on Fire's John Lee Dumas and a couple of other people. He's also from Excellence Expected, well-known guy in the podcasting game. And he said, no, you don't need a podcasting website, but you probably should have one. And the two reasons is that you might have goals behind your podcast. You might want to build your brand up. You might want to write blogs. You might want to sell products associated with the podcast, or you might be given advice in the hope that someone then buys consultation from you, something along those lines. And as such, then the website's really, really important. The other reason is trust. So as I was saying before, discoverability is a bit of an issue. With people that don't necessarily know that much about podcasts, they're not that tech savvy, trust is still a bit of a problem. And so and Mark was saying for your mum and dad, my mum and dad, they don't think that something is trustworthy until they know it has a website. You would think the same of even a plumber now, or someone you want to build, a garden wall for you. You would be worried if they didn't have a website. You're like, I'm not sure. The only other way is a referral, but still, you would still want to go on their website. So having a website adds that level of trust. So do you need a website? No. Should you have one? Probably. But don't let it stop you from getting started. You can have one after. And a lot of hosts, Libsyn, podcast websites, Blueberry, Podbean, will give you essentially a website, which will have all the players on it. It'll have the subscribe buttons, and it will have a link to a website if you want it to, or a link to your Facebook or your Twitter. So it's not that you absolutely have to have one. It absolutely isn't. Couple of shout outs. Ian, thanks for your comments. Kevin, Anthony, Maria. I've had some brilliant people on today. It's been a bit difficult. I apologise for the technical issues. What with Ant being on a train, we'll know that we can't do that from now on. So we won't be travelling on Fridays at 1 o'clock anymore. Maybe I should have got him to hop off at a train station or something. It does amaze me at this time in 2018, where we're worried about robots taking over, we can't get good internet on a train. Maybe Ant just needs to stop being so tight and just pay for first class next time. So that's pretty much all I want to do on the Facebook Live today. We will be back next Friday at 1. We'll be both in a place with stable internet connection, so we can both have a good chat. If you do want to sort of look at if you want to get some help, if you want to just ask a question, if you want to chat to people that are podcasting and just make some friends or network, and go over to podtips.net or just search PodTips on Facebook. It's a completely free Facebook community. There's no salesy gumph in there. It's just podcasters helping podcasters. So if you want to go over there, that's great. If you want to hear more about podcast websites, hear from Natalie Haley, myself and Anne, and Mark Asquith, then go to abruptaudio.com/podtipspod. Ant says Norwich has good internet, apparently. I'm not going to slag off Norwich. I could do too many Alan Partridge jokes. That's pretty much it. Thanks very much for watching. We'll see you next week on another Facebook Live, and we'll hopefully see you in the PodTips Facebook group. See you later.